So greetings, fellow human beings. We still want to talk about Sloterdijk's book, Infinite Mobilization, and a particular topic today will be Ernst Jünger, a very controversial author of the German Republic. Interestingly enough, he became 102 years old, and if you look, he has actually served in 2 world wars. And he started his career in France in 1913 for the how do you say that in English? The Foreign Legion? Yeah. You can see here what they say about him. Let me make myself smaller. Jünger ended life as an honored literary figure. All the critics continued to charge him with the alleged glorification of war as a transcendental experience in some of his early works. And that's an interesting statement, right? War as a transcendental experience. So hopefully we will see what that means when we proceed with our readings of Sloterdijk's Infinite Mobilization, and let's see how he comes to discuss Jünger. First of all, of course, we have a problem of the automobilization, if that is a word, the mobilization of our planet. And Sloterdijk wants to describe it with a metaphor of mobilization instead of using the so-called infantry methods, where you collect countless peripheral descriptions of the current status lapsus quo of the process in the bio and noosphere and slow accumulation of evidence. So, and he just says, okay, the number of billionaires is multiplying, the butterflies of our childhoods are no longer there, the trajectories of long-distance tourism and arms budgets are showing a significant upward trend, the populations in modernizing countries are exploding, while those in already modernized countries are stagnant, the holes in the ozone layer, the sneaker sales are flourishing, while those of surf gear are sinking, trees in low... I don't understand this. Sneakers are flourishing. Well, trees in low mountain ranges are becoming discolored and forming brush-like crowns. South African food can presently be found at Bavarian Sunday markets. The airtime of a Soviet nuclear bullet is 120 seconds from the Urals to Bad Godesberg, and so on. So he just gives a potpourri of modern anxieties that we have, and but that's not the point. So the endless number of such statements only makes sense if they find a common denominator, and he believes the common denominator can be found in the word mobilization. And this word is actually borrowed from the world of wars, so it already has a connotation where we should be skeptical. And he then discovers that Ernst Jünger, in this context, had already dislodged the phenomenon of mobilization from its military-specific meaning in the early 1930s in order to describe that modernity that he encountered. So, and there's a problem with Jünger, and Sloterdijk sees that because he is for many people, a scandal-ridden, unacceptable, hated rather than refuted author, as he says here. And we see that because he adopts these cold metaphors, and people criticize Jünger and say whoever would adopt this cold evil optic for an analysis of late modern processes, even on a trial basis, risks experiencing a historical, philosophical Damaskus. So what does that mean, a experience in Damaskus? So Sloterdijk very often uses very interesting metaphors, right? And I just looked that up. And Damaskus are those experiences in which a person has a sudden insight that radically changes their belief. And it comes actually from the Bible, when Saul, who was to become the Apostle Paul, was on his way to Damascus to persecute Christians and suddenly blinded by a bright light. and he heard the voice of Jesus. Believing he was being addressed by a higher power, Saul was terrified. There are several interpretations of what happened next. So we have here a Damascus experience, and to be honest, I don't understand this completely in the text. So I think we should try to use the evil World War metaphor, and then we will have an enlightening experience. And the idea of mobilization is not comparable to the idea that the just are just sleeping. Okay? So mobilization, and especially the idea of total mobilization, which is a war metaphor, will tell us way more about the situation. And what this total mobilization does is that it neutralizes the morally important difference between work and war and increasingly overrides the once existing distinction between rest, position, and deployment. To bring everything considered power to a power, or everything that is a power reserve in us, any energy that we have left, should be mobilized to the front and drive any potential forward towards this realization. Jünger is that evil man whom we will always quote from a great distance, though of course never without respect of his perceptual capacity. But his experiences generated a previously unobtained definition of modern technology as the mobilization of the planet. We are the figure of the worker. So war is a transcendental experience of how the transcendental subject has to act in our society. The image, the imaginary of the transcendental subject, of course, because Sloterdijk would say it's an illusion. And this illusion becomes very visual. I just watched a documentary on Ernst Jünger, and there they said when World War I broke out, people were celebrating on the streets. They were celebrating that now we get mobilized. And so I recommend this documentary. It's not in German. It's not in English. I don't know which language it is. Maybe it's Dutch. And it's a documentary about Ernst Jünger, 102 years in the heart of Europe. Let's just watch a very small fraction of it.
Vi hade bestämt oss för att göra en film om en mycket kontroversiell man som alltid fascinerat oss. Den tyske författaren, filosofen, krigaren och samlaren Ernst Jünger. En man som är lika kluven och motsägelsefull som vårt eget europeiska 1900-tal. Han har dekorerats av Tysklands siste kejsare, diskuterat konst med Picasso, umgåtts med Goebbels och experimenterade med LSD redan för 50 år sedan. Vem var denna man som har valt att stå utanför den offentliga debatten ända sedan 1910?
So, very interesting man. He associated with the National Socialist regime in a sense. I don't know so much about him. It seems he was still respected as a philosopher, so he was not completely rejected. And he had a tremendous capability of observing society. As he says himself in the interview, he has, they could get him at a very old age. I believe he must be 100 years old or something for an interview. And they said, you have a very good capacity of observing. And let's see how he responds to that.
Soll ab und zu, dass sie waren bestraft mit einem sehr genauen Observationsvermögen.
Ja, natürlich. Das ist ungefähr so, wie wenn einer mit einem sehr genauen Geruchsvermögen gestraft ist. Man riecht viel mehr unangenehme Dinge als angenehme. Ja.
So, yeah, that's a very interesting observation, though not key. for our analysis of society. But obviously, he's not just staying on the superficial level. He has gone through 2 wars, and his books, I believe Storm of Steel, seem to describe in incredible detail how people suffered during the war, were shot, wounded, and so on and so forth. And this gives you probably another depiction of the society that we live in, that may not focus on trivial struggles anymore, where we usually get involved too often.
Ernst Jünger har upplevt hela 1900-talet, den tid som brukar kallas den moderna. Det århundrade då vi delvis lät oss bländas av vår egen teknik och fyllde vårt inre med ett djupare mörker. Ställda inför möjligheten att utplåna det vi ännu inte lärt känna, oss själva.
Yeah, so this is technically what Sloterdijk describes, right? The way of how we destroy our society as we are blinded by technology. And the question now is really, how do we have to develop an alternative critique? And Sloterdijk says here that mobilization as an autogenous fundamental process of modernity leads to the provision of ever-increasing movement potentials for position holding, which precisely by way of the conditions and effects of this deployment make themselves impossible as positions to drift into the unattainable. So what he means is that any kind of mobilization leads to destruction. And he believes that it is here where the kinetic paradoxes open up and a social critique of false mobility can be developed. He thinks that after Marxism and the Frankfurt School, this is the 3rd version of critical theory of a sophisticated kind. And it has the possibility to maybe imagine a correct movement in distinction from something that is called a false mobilization. He also calls that a preschool of mobilization, but I suggest that we read that the next time. I think 12 minutes getting bombarded with new intellectual concepts, that can be enough. So I hope you enjoyed this very small introduction to Ernst Jünger to further the concept of mobilization and to relate it to the transcendental experience of war, which obviously is not a good one. I'm going to look deeper into Ernst Jünger. I just heard his name over and over again. I hope you do that too. And I hope that you can find a perspective for your life where you're not get exhausted by the current mobilizing tendencies of our society, so that you can live a long and calm life, not interesting times, as the Chinese say, and prosper. Thank you very much.